ladies and gentlemen. This is Jeff Rains coming to you again with Foundation of Civilization. And this is my weekly rundown of the things that have been going on this past week. The important things that I can run across in the news. Across the world, oil, West Texas crude was down 2.45% to $67.02 a barrel. Brent North Sea crude up, or I'm sorry, was down, also down 2.09% to $71.04. The OPEC basket was down 3.05% to $71.67. Gold was down very slightly at 0.22% to $2,562.86. Silver was down 0.82% to $30.25. On the Baltic Exchange goods, it was actually up quite a bit, 19.4% to $1,785. Over in Europe, the exchanges DAX for the week was down 1.3% to 210.81. The FTSE down very slightly at 0.11% to 8,063.61. CAC 40 was down 2.12% to 7,269.63. The IBEX was down very, very slightly at 0.078 to 11,635.90. Stocks 50 was down 1.32% to 4,794.85. In Spain, flooding continued for this week, much as it did last week. This week, however, protests erupted after the additional flooding highlighted inadequate disaster response by the government. Hundreds of casualties and dozens of buildings have been damaged. In Germany, a young man was arrested after it was discovered he was planning a vehicle ramming attack at a market later this year. Also, continuing in Europe, Russia has stopped shipping natural gas to Austria. Europeans are already struggling with high energy costs, and this will not help in the cold European winters. Over in Asia, the indexes, Nikkei was down this week 2.2% to 38,642.91. The SSE index was down 2.96% to 3,330 and 0.73. The Hang Seng Index was down 4.11% to 19,426.34. The BSE Sensex was down 2.49% to 77,480.31. The Nifty 50 was down this week 2.35% to 23,532.70. In India, Manipur, violence erupted with the homes of ministers being targeted. Security forces drove away the protesters, and curfews were imposed in Imphal East and West, and internet and data services were suspended to curb hate speech. On November 14th, the Philippines adopted new laws, maritime laws, asserting control over the disputed Scarborough Shoals and Spratly Islands. A number of countries have made claim to these islands over the years, including China. China, in response, recalled the Philippine ambassador to discuss these new laws. In a trip this week, Chinese Premier Xi Jinping traveled to Peru to meet with the leaders of that country and leaders of other countries, celebrating the opening, and I hope I have this right, it's either Shanghai or Shansei port, a $1.3 billion port just north of Lima. This will strengthen Chinese influence in Latin America. During his visit there, U.S. President Joe Biden was there at the same time, and the two held a meeting. It's worthy to note that the Chinese premier spent much more time with other leaders than he did with President Joe Biden. This may be due in part to Joe Biden stepping down as U.S. president in January and being replaced by Donald Trump. It also likely has something to do with U.S.'s continued support of an independent Taiwan. A 21-year-old uh, identified as Zhu Jin killed 8 people, wounded 8 at the Wuhi Vocational School and Technical College. His online post stated that he was stressed from working long hours with no days off, and he was not getting paid properly, and his insurance was not being covered. Now, over in the Middle East, on November 12th, Israel allowed the deadline to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza to pass with no significant changes. This past week, Israeli ground forces in Lebanon continued to push their operations, moving slowly into Lebanon. They only made it 3 miles and they lost 6 troops, uh, increasing the number of total Israelis killed since the Lebanese invasion to 47. This has not slowed the Hezbollah forces from attacking Israel with rockets and missiles. Israel was also noted as having destroyed an active nuclear weapons research facility in Iran. In Yemen, the Houthi rebels displayed some of their arsenal and capabilities to the shock of Pentagon's top weapons buyer. Now, after the election with Donald Trump, a number of places are starting to talk peace. Gaza and Hamas is under pressure and called for an immediate end to their conflict. Qatar, part of the pressure that's being brought to them is that Qatar has removed themselves from mediation and are kicking out the Hamas leaders from their country. In Africa, 13 people were killed in ongoing violence in the Congo. The South African government has refused to help illegal miners trapped in a closed mine. Uganda continues to struggle to feed 1.7 million refugees as international support dwindles. These refugees are fleeing violence from Uganda's neighbors, but obviously support is waning. Nigeria signed a $1.2 billion deal with Chinese state-owned company to revamp a key gas plant. Now in the Americas, as far as the indexes go, for the week, the Dow Jones average was down 2.34% to 43,444.99. The S&P was down 2.28% to 5,870.62. In Cuba, a southeast Cuba, a 6.8 earthquake struck, causing significant damage to the area. In Haiti, Haiti continues to struggle with the collapse of their government, and multiple airlines have reported small arms fire striking aircraft. On November 11th, Spirit Airlines was struck and diverted to neighboring Dominican Republic. On November 12th, on additional flights, a JetBlue aircraft was found to have a small arms impact. The collapse of the nation has had severe effects on security. Gangs run the country, and up until now, the gang leaders have kept tight control over their foot soldiers to protect the tourism. Tourism is one of the remaining ways that brings money into the country, and the gangs have maintained tight control so that uh, the country continue to receive this money. These incidents indicate that gang leaders may be losing control. It is all now. It is entirely possible that these few incidents have already been resolved by the gang leaders. In Brazil, a suicide bomber conducted an attack at the Brazilian Supreme Court. The only life taken was that of the bomber. A number of cell phone service providers noted interruption this past week. Verizon had a service outage affecting almost all of its customers in the Northeast United States. In Louisville, Kentucky, an explosion at a food dye factory caused the local authorities to create a shelter in place order for uh, for residents in the area. After the election of President Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, a NATO chief has threatened to expel the United States from NATO. There continues to be a dispute arising from the first Trump administration till now. President Trump was not happy about the lack of spending by NATO nations. They had committed to spend 2% of their budgets, their government budgets, on defense spending, and they had not been. I expect that there is zero chance that NATO is going to kick the United States out. We are pretty much are the uh, the force behind NATO. In also following the election, in a further effort to prove that they cannot accurately report any news whatsoever, the Washington Post claimed that Putin and Trump talked and discussed quite a few things. It was later proven that this was not true. In New York, the FBI raided the home of CEO of Polymarkets. No reason was given. It is expected that somehow or another he had influenced the election. Speculation is that somehow he had influenced the election. In Pennsylvania, in Bucks County, they continue to count illegal votes despite a judge's order. Uh, One of a panel of judges in the local area, Diane Ellis. I hope we get this name correct. Diane Ellis Marseglia. She noted that the ballots that they were counting were illegal, but they just don't seem to care because everybody seems to be violating the law these days. That I don't know how that's supposed to stand. I don't know how the people are supposed to just listen to uh, what judges say if they're not going to follow the law. Also, this week, a North Carolina representative, Willie Nickel, suggested that a shadow cabinet should be set up to counter the cabinet appointments of President elect Donald Trump. This is actually something that is common in Europe, but it is likely to be perceived as sedition in the United States. And it will also be seen as the deep state coming out of the shadows. In threats of violence, pro Hamas groups are planting the seeds of domestic terrorism in the United States, according to a new report. In Over in the Middle East, still, U.S. forces struck back at Iranian-backed targets in Syria. This was in retaliation to those forces having attacked the United States the day before. Uh, along with, Following along with the election of President-elect Donald Trump, a number of bureaucrats in Washington and various forms of government are clapping back at his impending inauguration. Pentagon leaders are concerned that two-thirds of them are going to be eliminated. Many of the generals, some of the admirals, were associated with the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. He's made statements against some of these admirals and generals, and many of the admirals and generals who are promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. In response, many of these generals and admirals are scrubbing their social media posts. The media, having finally read the results of the election and starting to understand them, just how disastrous they were, have decided to respond and to try to um, curry favor with more conservative views in the country. The View has stated they plan on adding Trump supporters and conservatives to balance out their show. Also on The View, And I did a video on this earlier this week, so I hope that you guys will review that. There's a lot of really bad responses to the election. A lot of people who are unhappy with the results. One of the hosts, Sonny Hostin on The View, suggested it was moral to cut off family members if they had voted for Donald Trump. I have to reiterate from my video, this is insane. There's absolutely no reason to elevate a politician above your family and friends. Now I'll add the list to this list of show hosts. You don't want to elevate a show host above your family and friends. None of the politicians or show hosts, bureaucrats will be there for you whenever you need help. It will be your family and your friends. Do not cut them off because you don't agree with the way that they voted. In fact, I bet if you sit down and talk to them, you will find a solution to about 80% of the problems. You'll agree with their solutions to about 80% of the problems. Uh, it's been noted this week that a huge number of advertisers are finally returning to X after very publicly deciding that they were no longer going to advertise. Uh, and Elon Musk very forcefully told them that they could leave, that he was not going to be held hostage. Now they're trying to quietly return to platform. Now I saved one of the most controversial things for the end here. President-elect Donald Trump has started selecting his uh, uh, his staff. Susie Wiles is being appointed as his chief of staff, and Trump is naming longtime advisor Stephen Miller, an immigration hardliner, to be the deputy chief of policy in his new administration. Former Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Tom Homan, who served in the same position under Obama and also under Trump, is going to be the border czar. Trump has asked Representative Mike Waltz, a current congressional representative from Florida, to be his national security advisors. Uh, he has selected Lee Zeldin to serve as EPA administrator, and he has selected Representative Elise Stefanik to be his U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He has chosen Marco Rubio to be his Secretary of State. CIA Director, he's chosen John Ratcliffe. The U.S. Ambassador to Israel is Mike Huckabee. Yeah, Defense Secretary is a rather controversial selection of Pete Hegseth. Now, Pete is partly controversial because he does not have uh, the administrative experience that many others have had. But Pete is a field grade officer in the Maryland National Guard, and he's had 20 years experience in the military. He is also, well, I'm going to save that for a minute, in a minute. The Interior Secretary is Doug Burgum. White House Counsel is William McGinley. Solicitor General is Dean John Sauer. Secretary of Homeland Security is Christy Nome. Now, there's quite a few other ones that I'm not going to go through. But I am going to note some very key ones, and I'm going to go back to the Hegseth selection. Many of these people have been targeted by the current administration, and they have shown that they're going to shake up the bureaucracy that they're being installed over. Two of the very controversial picks have been Robert F. Kennedy, who has been a long time critic of the Food and Drug Administration and the CDC. He is a lawyer. He is not a scientist. He is a lawyer who has had a long history of challenging these organizations in court. The other very controversial picks, which I'm actually not really sure why it's so controversial, aside from wild conspiracy theories, is Tulsi Gabbard. She's being chosen to be the director of national security. I'm sorry, director of national intelligence. Uh, their long-term bureaucrats are calling in to question her loyalty to the country. I, in turn, call in their loyalty to this country, having not been very vocal over the past few years with the current administration. Uh, Tulsi Gabbard, it should be noted, she came under a lot of fire. She was originally a Democrat, but then she started criticizing some of the pro-war stances that the Democrats were having. She parted ways with the Democrat Party, and as soon as she started criticizing them, she was put on the a special interest list with the TSA. Every time she flew, she had a number of agents flying with her. She had to go through additional screening, and now it's kind of funny. She's going to be able to be in charge of many of the people that put her under the scrutiny. I think it's absolutely ridiculous to call into question her loyalty without calling into question the current administration's loyalty. This is going to be interesting because, like I said, these people are being installed so they can shake up some of the organizations that are there now. It's this goes in line with President Trump's uh, um, history. He has been known as a disruptor, and um, well, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up my review for the week, significant events for the week, and I hope that you guys are doing well and you are watching and waiting and paying attention to what is going on in the world and preparing yourselves for the changes and challenges ahead. Much love to everybody, and like I said, I hope you're doing fine. Please, please, please do not let politicians and and bureaucrats and show hosts and entertainers get between you and your family and your friends. Go back out, fix those relationships if you need to. It is absolutely absurd to let those things get in the way of what's happening in your life. Thanks again and please like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support me, please, get a hold of a book. I would much appreciate it. Thanks again. Have a wonderful rest of your week.